we are comparing Shadow of Mordor on the Potato Masher and the PS4. If you don't know what the Potato Masher is, it is a $350 computer custom built in December of 2014 and designed to compete against the PlayStation 4 for the rest of its life cycle. Now, a couple quick notes about this video. Everything is recorded at 1080p 30 FPS regardless of what resolution and frame rate it is being played at. The only exception is a couple sections of the video which will be running at 60 FPS at 1080p, and I highly recommend you watch this video at 60 FPS on YouTube if your browser is capable of doing that. Also, the full resolution, full quality source download will be available in the description of this video if you want to check it out. Also, there are links to the Potato Masher and its specs if you have any more questions about it. So, Shadows of Mordor runs at 1080p and 30 FPS on the PlayStation 4, and supposedly it looks pretty comparable to high on the PC, and I would say that's pretty accurate. Both versions of the game look great. Now, of course, since they take place in kind of a barren wasteland, the backgrounds don't look amazing, but the character models, the weapons, everything like that is super well done, great textures, things like that. And honestly, at 1080p, I would say there isn't really a big difference between either of these versions. Now, I consulted with the Evil Viking 13, who has pretty much beaten this game at 1440p on the highest settings, and he said there are definite differences when you get up to the really high resolutions. That's where the PC can really shine, but at 1080p, this is a great looking game on both systems. Even textures, lighting, everything like that is so close, it's pretty much indistinguishable, although the PC, of course, does give you more options to tweak things as you see fit. Now, I do need to take a break from comparing all the shiny things to give you guys a little bit of a warning and a disclaimer based on my testing. Now, if you want to play on the PC, you need to pay attention in the graphics settings. When they tell you that the ultra texture settings need at least 4 to 8 gigabytes of video memory, you need to listen to them. I decided to run the textures all the way up and see what would happen, and that was a giant mistake because I experienced some rather incredible amounts of stuttering, which, to be fair, I went against what they recommended in the game options, but it still makes the game almost unplayable if you accidentally run the graphics options too high, at least on textures. So for the rest of this review, the textures are at medium, which is what is recommended for 2 gigabytes of video memory, like the Potato Masher has. Now, if you're thinking, well man, who can play with the highest texture settings? Not many people. They recommend 8 gigabytes for the Ultra HD Textures pack, and there's only a handful of video cards that have ever been released with that much video memory, so it's not the type of thing that many people are going to experience, but you know, in another 5 or 6 years, it probably means this game is going to look fantastic. So overall, it's a great looking game on both systems. Maybe a slight edge goes to the PC, but it's so close that you can't really complain about either. Shadow of Mordor has a nifty little frame rate lock that lets you choose to sync at either 30 or 60 FPS. Now, you can use this independently of VSync, and any screen tearing you see on the Potato Masher or PC versions of Shadow of Mordor in this video are because I was running with the frame rate lock on but VSync off just to see what it looked like. And the game actually has quite a bit of frame tearing when you do this, so I would highly recommend turning on VSync whether or not you're using the frame rate lock. Now, the game runs great at 60 FPS. This is still on very high settings. Again, that's high on everything except for the textures, which stay at medium, and the tessellation, which also stays at normal. But everything else is on the highest settings, and it runs and looks fantastic. It's a very, very smooth 60 FPS. Now, you might be thinking, well, the PS4 also looks smooth in all the footage you've shown, and I don't really see any big difference between 30 and 60 FPS. Well, that's because I've recorded 30 FPS footage, because that's what our external recorder will do. Now, using NVIDIA Shadowplay, I am able to record clips at native 60 FPS. So here, watch a fight in 60 FPS on the Potato Masher versus 30 FPS on the PlayStation 4 and see if you can spot a little bit of a difference. Now, while the frame rate you play at can come down to individual preference for many people, there's no denying that 60 FPS is noticeably smoother, faster, and just better looking for any type of fighting, racing, shooting, any game that features fast action. 60 FPS definitely looks better. Now, it's not to say that the game is unplayable on the PlayStation 4. Far from it. The 30 FPS does look pretty good, and you can certainly play the whole game like that, and it's great, but the game is easily capable of 60 FPS on a computer like the Potato Masher, and this is with everything on the highest settings except for the textures and the tessellation. So it's definitely worth playing at 60 FPS if your computer is capable of it, and the Potato Masher definitely is. The game experienced very few, if any, frame rate drops, and I really had no problem staying at a very locked 60 FPS with everything but the textures and tessellation on the highest settings. If VSync is on, that will largely take care of the frame tearing problem, except for during cutscenes where for some reason there are still plenty of screen tearing. I'm not really sure why, but during gameplay it looks great. So frame rate is all well and good, but what happens if you have a monitor that's a higher resolution than 1080p? Well, you will be happy to know that Shadow of Mordor will probably run pretty fantastically. Here it is running at 1440p with all settings except for texture and tessellation set to high, and if it's okay with you guys, I'm not going to talk about textures and tessellation for the rest of the video, and you guys just know what I'm talking about when I say high, very high, etc. But yeah, here it is running at a pretty locked. You see it's dipping there to 28 FPS. It's technically locked, but I guess you can get occasional dips. But this is running at 1440p with everything on high, and as you can see, the game still looks fantastic. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, yeah, but I know this $350 computer can play it at 1440p at 30 FPS on high, but what happens if I need to play at 1440p at 60 FPS? Well, you are going to have to make some sacrifices and drop all the way down to low. The foliage and plants on the ground are going to be a little less detailed, as are the models, textures, pretty much everything is going to be less detailed. But hey, it still looks great. The super sampling makes the models look quite a bit better in my opinion, even though they technically have less detail. And everything just looks sharp and very crisp and very, very nice. So if you want to run this at 1440p at 60 FPS, it's definitely possible. Moving right along, here's the game running at 4K with everything on the lowest settings. Now, it still looks pretty good. Like, at any settings, this still is not a bad looking game, but all of the shadows, ground cover, etc., is at the lowest it's going to be. And I did turn off the frame rate lock just so you could see as good as it could possibly do at 4K, and the frame rate stayed in the mid-30s pretty consistently, which made me wonder, could we possibly bump the visual settings up just a little bit? And yes, we can. Here's the game running at 30 FPS locked on medium settings at 4K. Yes, that's correct, medium settings at 4K. Now you might be thinking, what's the big deal? I mean 4K doesn't look that much better, you know, it looks a little sharper, 1440p looked a little sharper. Why is running at 4K such a big deal? Well, here, let me explain. So here would be Shadow of Mordor running at the equivalent size of 900p. Let's say you bought the game on your Xbox One because you spent $150 more than the cost of the Potato Masher on your console. Now let's say you bought it on the PS4 or you're running it on a regular PC at 1080p. Well, that's how big it would be. Well, let's say you have a 1440p monitor. This is how many extra pixels you're pushing. And finally, if you want a game at 4K, that's how big the image is compared to all the others. So as you can see, 4K is a tremendous achievement for a computer as cheap as the Potato Masher. Now obviously, we're not expecting to be able to run games at 4K in like another 4 or 5 years with this thing, but for now, it's pretty impressive. So this is a good looking, good running game that can play at really great resolutions and with really great tweaking options on the Potato Masher and on the PlayStation 4. It's also really great looking and a very smooth running if it is only at 30 FPS. Now I of course have to give the edge to the Potato Masher because of all the added resolution options, all the different graphics, tweaks, everything like that you can do. Of course the PlayStation 4 can't compete with that, but the game still runs really great on it. So I think this is a definite win for the Potato Masher, but you really can't go wrong playing this game on either system. Of course, it's also a ton of fun, which I didn't really talk about a ton in this review because this is more of a technical thing, but you should definitely check the game out if you like hack and slash beat 'em ups or if you like Lord of the Rings mythology. Now, if you have any questions, take a look in the description for links to the Potato Masher build videos, specs, things like that, and above all else, have a good day.